So in this video I want to make myself another book to go alongside the Book of the Dead, and this time I think I'm going to make the Book of Names. And it's going to be simpler than the last one. I just want it to be old, gnarly leather book. So I've got some reference here, and this is the kind of thing I'm going to go for. And I want it to be kind of gnarled old leather with some chunky metal edges and worse for wear. And I probably want to have the title, Book of Names, carved into the front of it. So this time I don't think I'm going to do any fancy emblem on the middle, but rather just have some sort of hand carved weird name on the front, maybe with some glowing text on the inside. So first thing I need to do is to just pop in some basic shapes. So we want a cube, so I'm going to go over to the tool menu here, and I'm just going to find the cube, drag it out onto the screen. So at the moment it's not a polymesh, so we can't really do any modeling on this yet. So what we can do is come up here, make polymesh 3D, and that'll activate it, so now it is capable of being sculpted on. Okay, so let's get this into kind of some sort of book shape, and I'm going to make my reference so that it stays on top as well. And I'm just going to use the transpose tool to kind of get this into the shape I want. And we're not going to be able to open this book, so it's just going to be like flat front, and we're also going to have the cover. So what I should really do is duplicate this in the subtool. So let's just get the book up and we'll duplicate this, and that way we've got one that can be the inner and one that can be the outer. So the outer one selected, which could be there. I'm going to just scale that up. Alright, so now we've got the outer bit. And now we need to kind of cut the inside of this away to expose some pages. So what I'll do is turn off perspective view, and I'll hold Control and Shift and go to my brushes and select clip curve. Okay, then holding Control and Shift, I'm going to drag this clip curve out, and you can see there's like a gradient, so it's going to push anything beyond that gradient towards that line we drew out. You can see at the moment that doesn't really work. So probably what's best to do is, if we go to Geometry tab and go down to Dynamesh, we can Dynamesh this now. Okay, that looks good. Turn off symmetry, and then what I'm going to do is hold Shift and Control and drag down the edge here. So you will see that along that edge there is a little gradient, so anything beyond that gradient should be pushed towards that edge. So if we let go, we can see that's clipped out a nice chunk of this book, and that creates our cover for now. And then I want to add like a curve to the pages of this book. So what I think I'll do is, if I drag out a mask along the middle there, and then just soften that mask by holding Control and clicking it once, kind of softens it out, and then to invert it, click off it, and then go to Transpose tool and just scale that in. So we probably need to make the mask a little bit bigger. Soften it, and then invert it and scale that in. Yeah, that's nice. That creates like a nice curve to the interior of this. Possibly too much curve there. And then I'm just going to scale this up a little bit on both sides. Just make sure it's nicely embedded. I probably want to do the same for the back of the book as well to get that nice curve on the back. So I'm just going to mask that interior. And I probably actually want to activate symmetry, but then change the symmetry to the Z. Now mask that interior. Soften it right up by clicking it, then invert that. Just move that out a little bit. Create a bit of a curve to the spine of that. And then you can see there's a little gap underneath there, which actually most books do have a gap between the pages and the spine, but we don't want that kind of detail on here. We want to make this a lot simpler, as this is going to be a solid object. So what we can do is, with the pages selected, go to Solo, select the back of this, turn symmetry off, invert that, and kind of just crush that down there, make it a bit flatter. There we go. Oh, it's sticking through a little bit. I'll move it back towards the front. There we go. And then make sure them pages fit nicely with the book all around. Okay, so almost got all the different parts of this book that we want together. We just want some like chunky metal edges now, so looking through this, I think I actually like this kind of thing, just like big slabs along the bottom. So I think I'm going to keep it simple and just do that. So what we can do is actually use the book cover to create those. So I've got to decide whether I want it all the way around the edge or just on the front. I think I actually do want it all the way around the edge. So I'm going to select this book cover again, and a fast way of selecting things, rather than go to subtool, especially if you've got like hundreds of things, it's just to hold Alt and click the thing you want selected. So if I hold Alt, I can click these pages and they will select. It's just a little simple thing there. Duplicate this book and then mask the bottom of it, and then make that its own polygroup, group masked, and then Shift and Control click the bottom polygroup so only that one's displayed, and then I can go up to split and split hidden, and then I can delete the big piece. So I'm left with this bottom piece, but at the moment it's got a hole along the whole edge of it. I can just go to Dynamesh, turn Dynamesh on, and that will seal it up. So then we just want to make it slightly bigger than the front cover. So a good way of doing that is we come down to deformation at the side here and go down to inflate and just increase that a little bit, and inflate that metal so that it's nice and chunky. On the reference here it's very thin, but I want it to be a bit more substantial than that. So now we've got this stage, I want to make a few modifications to this. So what I'm going to do is cut out a little bit at the bottom here so it's not just a straight line across the top. I think that'll make it look a little bit more interesting. So again, I'm just going to use the clip curve brush and I'm going to draw a line down, then I'm going to hit Alt twice to make a sharp edge. I'm going to draw that across. And then hit Alt twice again and move that back up. And that'll cut out both sides. Actually, I think I want it a little bit more deeper than that. And you know, I've not got a concept for this. It's a lot easier if you make yourself a little concept first, but sometimes I like the kind of unpredictability of just modelling something for fun. So I think the next thing I want to do is I want to create these like ridges across the back here, and I think actually that's leather wrapped around some sort of string or rope, maybe to support the back pages. Inflate that. So now we've got these nice ridges out the side and we should be able to smooth them off. So I don't really know where I want to go with this in terms of any extra detail. So what I think I'll do, I don't want to get overcomplicated at this stage. I think I'm going to sculpt the two pieces, the three pieces that I've got up at the moment. And then from there, I think what I'll do is add like a nice pattern to the front of it, as if maybe it was originally a different book, and then kind of carve in the words Book of Names on the front of this. Yeah, so I'll just go over this, soften everything up a little bit, use the hard trim adaptive around all the edges and kind of get it to be a little bit more polished. Okay, so I've got the basic shape of the book and I want to add some studs to the metal. So the simplest way of doing that for me would be to select the metal, and then what I'm going to do is just draw out a little circle on that metal to the size of the stud I want, and then go up down to extract on the subtools palette and click extract. And that will extract a little surface based on the thickness you set there. So let's have a little closer look at this. So we can see that thickness. So I'm just going to turn it up a little bit. Extract again. And then once I'm happy with that, I can hit accept, and then we can simply polish this off a little bit, and then go down to the Dynamesh tab and hit Dynamesh. We have something like that, and then using the trim dynamic, I'm just going to shape this up into a more pleasing kind of hammered beaten stud. And then to duplicate this along the book, I want to just hold Control and grab that direction and just drag it across, and it should duplicate that, masking off the previous one. Right, so on the front of this I want to lay down a simple pattern that's been embossed into the front, and to do that I think the best way would probably be to make an alpha, a nice pattern in Photoshop, and bring it in as a black and white alpha. Created this pattern here, and I've made sure it's scaled right so that it would fit kind of in the shape I want on the front of the book, and I've saved this out as a PNG, and then I've loaded that into one of the brushes in Zbrush. And we can do that, or we can use the Z project this through, but I'm going to try with just dragging this out onto the front of the book here, just using this imported in as an alpha. So we click in the middle of the book here and drag this out. We can see our pattern is projected onto the front of that book nicely. However, at the moment it's a little bit too low poly, so it's getting this kind of jagged edges, and it's also projecting straight through to the back of the book as well. What I need to do is come down to the Dynamesh here and up the resolution. So I'm going to up it to 1000, probably about 700 actually, and then just re-Dynamesh that, and that's re-Dynamesh to 4 million, so that's quite a lot. That should be plenty enough for us to get the detail we want. And then I want to just mask the front of that and then invert that mask. That way we're only going to be affecting the front of this book. So with this selected, I want to try and guess at the center here, so I'm going to go about there and then just drag that out and line it up as neatly as possible. So I think I'm a little bit too far over here, so I'm going to try that again. Now happy with that. So I've got some nice details on the front of this book here, and now I can go over the rest of the leather on this book, and I want to add some kind of imperfections, so some scratches, some little bit of noise. How I'm going to do that is with the Orbs Cracks brush. It's one of my favourite brushes, but basically I'm going to go around all the edges here and just add some little scratches and knocks into there, and then use brushes like Pinch to sharpen up some of them scratches, and then Trim Dynamic to maybe add a little bit of breakdown of that as well. Okay, so the front of this book, I want to put like some text on it, and I want it to look like it's kind of cut into the book by like a knife. I'm actually going to try and do this on a separate layer. So we're going down to layers here and create a new layer, and the recording is set to on automatically. Now becomes the tricky bit. I want to kind of make this cut down into this. So I think first of all is to polish it a little bit and get rid of some of that design from the inside of that text. And then I'm going to grab the transpose tool and I'm just going to move that inwards a little bit. Okay, so it's passing right through the cover of the book there, so that's not brilliant. So maybe we need to hit solo so we can see it. We want to go deeper than that. And then maybe scale it slightly inwards. And we don't want it too deep. Right, let's try to inflate this. Right, there we go. So inflating it seems to be bringing it slightly together. So I need to go a bit deeper, I think. Ah, that's not nice. Let's try in the opposite direction. Oh, that looks like it's full of like a gel, some sort of goo. Maybe I like that. I do want it to glow. Maybe it can be full of blood or something. So I think actually I like this. This isn't what I was originally going for, but I kind of like the way it's got this like soft interior. Go roll that mask a little bit and then polish this off. Okay, so now we've got a softer outside, and then I want to grow the mask again. Actually, we want to shrink the mask because it's inverted. And then I'm going to try and polish the whole thing with some sharp edges. So I'm going to go to geometry. I'm not sure this will work, but clay polish here. I'm going to turn the minimum up and the sharpness up a little bit. Clay polish that. Okay, so we've got this kind of result. Nice sharp edges, but it's all looking a bit flat. So what I want to do is try and grab some of these corners and lift them up away from the book a little bit. I think it needs a strap, like a strap around it, tied tight to keep it nice and safe. So I'm just going to do that quickly, and then we can look at finishing this off. Right, I think almost done. The last thing I want to do is just add a little bit of like maybe blood seeping out of these holes, or maybe like some sort of ectoplasm or something like that. Okay, and I think that brings us to the end of the sculpting stage of this. So what I'm going to try and do is throw this in 3D coat, do a quick retopologize of it, and then the other items, or I guess just this item here, I'm just going to leave as is. It's kind of high poly, but I don't really mind. I think that'll be just fine. But these two together should be okay. So I'll throw it in 3D coat now and give that retopologize. So what I'm going to do is just export this low poly out, put it with the low poly book in Maya, and then decimate both this book and decimate the high poly version of the straps, and export that separately as a high poly file. So in one file I'll have the high poly book and the high poly strap, in another file I'll have the low poly book and the low poly strap. Now I'm going to take the low poly book into Maya in order to unwrap it so that I've got nice UVs, Now if you don't want to do that, if you're in a rush or you just need to get some colour on these, you can always put the low poly version in, go to Z plugin, go down to UV master and unwrap it in here. Now this doesn't give you a great result, but it will give you something to paint on so that you can get through to the next step. Now I would advise that you would unwrap it properly in Maya and also retopologize the strap so that it's sufficiently low poly and matches the rest of the book. But I'm in a bit of a rush. I don't want to really spend that long on this, so this will do for me. It's nice enough, low poly enough to be able to get into Marmoset and render nicely. Okay, so I've got this into Substance Painter here, and I've gone into Mesh Maps, and I've loaded in my high poly into here, increased the settings like the subsample size and the frontal distance a little bit, and I baked that down. And the detail that's come out is really, really good. I'm really pleased with this, especially considering the actual mesh of the book is quite low poly. I mean, you know, these are just like squares and stuff. You know, there's not really much detail in that lower mesh at all. But the detail from the high poly sculpt has come out really, really well. You can actually get away with quite a lot if you're careful. So yeah, I'm pleased with that. The next step is to start colouring this, but first of all I would like to move this piece back over here. The reason I pushed it over to one side along with the high poly is because I didn't want any of the baking information to bake down onto this, from this onto that. I want it to be nice and clean, and you can do that by going into Mesh Maps and actually setting the high poly and low poly suffix on your high poly and low poly meshes, so that way they'll bake anything with the high poly and low poly as a separate mesh, so it won't affect anyway. But the technique that I've used is called exploding your mesh before bringing it into baking, and it's just a technique I like to use. It's clean, it's simple, and it's pretty fast to do that instead of messing around with making the suffixes. So yeah, I'm going to now bring this back in together so that when I'm painting it I can see what it looks like together rather than to the side here. And to do that I'm just going to go into Maya. I'm going to select my low poly mesh for these pieces, and I'm simply going to bring them over here and align them back over the book where I want them to be. So there's a slight problem here with all the editing that I've done on these meshes. You can see there's some clipping going on here, and I've already baked the maps, so all I need to do is come into here, select the bits I want to change, and for this I'm going to go into the modelling, soft selection, turn on soft selection and turn that radius down, and then just move this so it's not intersecting that anymore. Then back in Substance Painter we can go to Edit, Project Configuration, and at the top here we can select our new low poly, which is the one together. Open that, and I'm just going to untick preserve strokes because there is no strokes. Click OK, and that simply moves the meshes across, and as long as they've got the same texture set, so I've not added any new materials, it should update accordingly and look just fine. So this is now ready to be textured and rendered out. you.